What's up, guys? David Baye back again with my co-host Johnny Styles for another episode of Inside Out, your go-to source for all things bodybuilding. Johnny, big weekend in the IFBB this past Friday and Saturday. Big things going on in Toronto. Big things out in the Mile High State. A lot of action to cover this week. How you doing, man?
A lot of action indeed. I think we had almost like I want to say 5 or 6 pro shows all around the country, and I also know in the other parts of the world there was an IFBB Pro League shows, and it's a jam packed show. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Toronto. We're gonna talk about Mile High Pro. You know, here and there, the American Fitness Expo. We know you were there, and
Absolutely.
between all things considered, Cedric McMillan just jumped into the show. We were expecting the biggest thing ever. And guess what? We got a battle between two New Yorkers. We got Akeem Williams and Juan Morel battling out.
Yeah, so you guys know we had the Toronto Pro this weekend. Ron Hache putting on a great event every year. One of the few shows in the IFBB that every division is represented. So fitness, women's bodybuilding, wheelchair bodybuilding. So they do a great job up in Toronto of really bringing a good show to the fans. And as you had noted, we had a late entry in Cedric McMillan, last year's Arnold Classic champion. Everybody kind of figured he was the hands-on favorite going into the show. That's not exactly how it played out. As you said, two New Yorkers battling it out, two guys actually who trained together at Bev's gym, Akeem Williams and Juan Morel. There we see Cedric McMillan. And I'll tell you what, guys, Cedric, and this has been something that has been discussed to no end. Cedric is one of those guys with the genetic potential and the structure to be Mr. Olympia. We've seen him dial it in really to his best potential, or close to that a handful of times, winning the Arnold Classic, moving up to, I believe, 7th at the Olympia a few years ago. He just was not at his best in Toronto. And that really opened the door for Akeem and Juan. Again, when we're talking everybody at their best, and certainly no disrespect to Juan or Akeem, but Cedric McMillan takes this show hands down. But as we talk all the time, the shows are judged on who brings it that day, and Cedric didn't bring it that day. I don't know if it was a case of maybe he did make a little bit of a last-minute decision and or didn't have quite enough time to prep for the show, or just didn't take these other guys seriously enough. But Cedric walking away in a third-place spot at a show like Toronto, not what he wanted. But Juan Morel certainly wanted that victory after placing runner-up to Nathan DeAsha in May, just a few weeks ago in the New York Pro. And so a hard-fought battle with Akeem Williams, but Juan Morel walking away with that first-place victory. Here we see some pictures from the first call-out. I'll tell you what, a lot of big dudes there. Juan Morel is a thick guy. Akeem Williams, Cedric McMillan, some taller guys than Cedric and Juan with some really big frames. But again, it came down to a battle of essentially just Juan and Akeem. Now, we talked about Akeem Williams a couple of weeks ago, Johnny, and with his showing in New York. Talked about what improvements he needed to make to do some damage, and it sure looks like he made some improvements between New York and Toronto.
Absolutely. I think I was talking to Oscar Arden, which is a good friend of mine, and I see him as a mentor too, because I did some hardcore training back in the day, like in the dungeon, in the famous Brooklyn dungeon. And Oscar had mentioned to me that he was gonna have redemption, and he needed to make some adjustments. And as we saw here, I was seeing the show live on somebody's phone, and as soon as Akeem walked, they placed him right dead center with Juan. I think that's when people started to really notice Akeem's true potential, especially from the sides and seeing all those crazy striations. This is the Akeem people have been asking for year after year, and as soon as he stepped in against Juan, I think there was just that little glimpse of like how great Akeem can really be.
Absolutely. Akeem Williams, pound for pound, is as big as any bodybuilder in the IFBB. He has no small muscle groups. As you saw there, that front double bicep, his arms are huge, huge quads. His lats are just hanging down. Akeem is massive. And, we've talked about his conditioning before, most specifically in his upper back, which he still does need to tighten up a little bit. Akeem was real tight from the front, great separation in his quads. As you can see here, when he turns and hits those side shots, the striations in his glutes, the details in his hamstring, incredibly impressive. But again, his upper back just a little bit softer than the rest of him. But as you can see, when he went next to Juan in some of these shots, like this most muscular, he's right there. And again, Juan's a really big competitor. I think really what it came down to these guys is some of those back shots and the conditioning that Juan was able to bring. Maybe just edged Akeem out a little bit. I talked to Bob Ciccarillo a little bit today about the show, got his insight. He was there, obviously. And, he seemed to think that it was a very close battle between these two guys. And, we talk so often, shows are won from the back. And usually when we say that, we're talking about somebody dominating size-wise from the back. But detail is every bit as important. And Juan edged out Akeem a little bit in the detail department in those back shots. And, as you can see here, Juan, his lats, a little bit more muscle in his back double bicep with that lat shot. Conditioning, I would say, was pretty close in the lower half. If nothing else, I might give it to Akeem as far as his lower half. But that rear double bicep for Akeem, one of his weaker shots, certainly not from a muscularity standpoint, but from a detail standpoint. And as we had alluded to in our last show, if Akeem Williams ever gets to the point where that back double bicep shot and his rear delts and his traps and everything like that are just shredded, the rest of his body is going to look otherworldly, and he's going to be a big impact on any stage, not just Toronto, not just New York, but the biggest of big stages. So congratulations, I think, is in order to most certainly to Juan for walking away as a winner, qualifying for that Olympia. We know he's excited to be back on that stage. But really, this has to be a confidence booster for Akeem, getting a second place finish at a big show like that and beating a couple of guys like Cedric McMillan, Rafael Brandau, who've been, Rafael placed ahead of him in New York. So a great showing for Akeem and for Juan. But again, Cedric, a little bit of a disappointment. What is? I guess it's kind of a moot point. What does Cedric have to do? We know he's got to come in just dialed in, and he can be winning anything. Johnny, any insight as to why we're seeing Cedric this far off at a show like Toronto?
To be honest with you, all my years working with Chris Aceto and knowing him and his clients, it's really hard. Cedric is very, very unpredictable. He can look a certain way one day, he can look a certain way the next day. So I really don't understand. This came out of nowhere. I didn't know he was gonna do this show. I think nobody knew he was gonna do this show. And
right.
He was clearly the favorite, because his frame and being taller and all that. But again, when he started to pose, aside from his beautiful shape, I think conditioning-wise, that's where really things took its toll. If you see Akeem and Juan look crazy in this back double. But talking to people that were there, and, if you see videos of this, you might see it a little bit clear. I think Akeem was hitting the back double a little bit way too, trying to flex too much. But I do agree his lower lats need, I guess, a little bit more or whatever. But conditioning-wise, these guys were great. And I guess in this shot, I guess Juan totally beats him, at least in this show. But can Akeem be top 10 at the Mr. Olympia, in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. Can Akeem Williams be top 10 at the Mr. Olympia? Yes, I think he can. I think he's got enough mass. I think he's got good enough lines. The question mark is going to be his conditioning. Now, if we look at the top 10 guys from previous years, the one thing they all have in common is they're all in damn good shape. Now, Akeem Williams, again, isn't missing anything. That front double bicep, he's got huge arms, he's got big lats. That rear double bicep, he might be giving up a little bit of ground. But if Akeem Williams comes in at 100%, and by 100%, I mean his upper back is detailed, it is as shredded as Phil Heath's, then Akeem can be a top 10 guy at the Olympia. And as with every other bodybuilding show, it's going to come down to conditioning. Akeem, he's got to qualify first. So let's not make that mistake. He's got to qualify first. He's got to win a show. But if he gets on that stage and he shows up shredded, he can be top 10.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you in that sense, especially because we've been talking about Akeem Williams for the longest time in the world. We've been talking about him, and if he brought in this gnarly dry Akeem Williams, it's gonna be very dangerous. Before we jump onto other stuff, other classes or whatever, Antoine Valiant comes back. We all know him from the internet era a couple of years back. Still has a huge following. And I'll be the first one to say he looked absolutely crazy.
Yeah, Antoine had, he had a really good head of steam coming in a handful of years ago. And for, reasons that I'm not 100% sure on, you hear rumblings, personal stuff, and he had some things he needed to work through. He stepped away from the stage for a little while. When people talked about his comeback, I was a little hesitant, like, okay, he's had some time away. Maybe he can refocus and kind of regather himself and bring in a package that we know he's capable of. But man, he for a comeback show, he looked phenomenal. I mean, there we saw him hitting a most muscular shot. If you go to NPC News Online, and again, thank you to NPC News Online for all these photos you guys are seeing. They have full galleries, and I was on their website earlier on, looking at all the pictures of Antoine, and he's hitting a lot of these classic shots. I think we have a few of those, and he really makes them look good. So I don't think he's going to be dropping down to classic physique anytime soon. I think he's a little bit above that weight limit. But as you see here, he really came out in that night show, busted out some of those classic poses, and really wowed that crowd in Canada. And I think it was a huge confidence booster for Antoine, not only be able to just get back on stage. When you've spent a few years away from stage and you've had a few obstacles in your life that you need to overcome that might keep other people away from the stage, to get back there is a big deal. To place top 10, I think probably would have been a win for him, but to get in that top 5 spot at the Toronto show, edging out, your fifth place winner, fifth place finisher, Rafael Brandao. Rafael did very well in New York and at the Cal show. So for Antoine to come and beat him, that's a huge deal. So again, as with Akeem and Juan, I think a huge congratulations is in order to Antoine. Another top 5 finish for Rafael. So I mean, he's on the way up. I believe he was 6th place in New York, then 3rd place, and now another 5th place. So he's got some top 5 finishes under his belt, and I expect big things from him. Rounding off our top 10, then we're going to talk a little bit about the 212 and the classic physique division. But we had Jeff Beckham in 6th place, Max Charles in 7th. Max still not getting to where he needs to be. Robin Brand in 8th place. Then Isaac Gavdel, not really familiar with Isaac, and Kili Kajala in 10th place. And again, some more pictures of that first call out here. You can see Jeff and Raphael on the outside battling for those 5th and 6th place spots, Cedric and Antoine. And then again, your winner, Juan Morel, next to your runner-up, Akeem Williams. So congratulations, Juan, Akeem, Antoine. I know I speak for everybody when I say we certainly hope to see Cedric come back better, whichever show he chooses to do next, and bring the physique that we know he's capable of. Moving on to the 212. Definitely an interesting battle. Not a lot of big names in that 212 division, not a lot of real heavy hitters as far as the top Olympia and Arnold guys. So we're going to kind of focus on number 1 and 2 there, and it was a battle, 2 very similar physiques as far as the 212 is concerned, in Zane Watson and Cody Montgomery. Johnny, Zane brought fantastic conditioning as always, and was rewarded with the win. What did you think of ZANE?
At first, I didn't know what to think, especially because we've had all this hype about Cody jumping into Classic, and as we saw Reagan in New York, jumping in and winning. And then I recorded Cody a couple of weeks ago. I want to say, 15 weeks ago, and he was dialed in with Chris Aceto to do Classic Physique, and Classic was just Classic all the way. Now we jump into the show, and out of nowhere, he jumps in and goes straight to 212. And, guess what? We got a really good battle between ZANE Watson and Cody. To me, personally, ZANE looked bigger. I do know both of them are Chris's clients again. Plug in the technician here. They're both Chris's clients, and they had a little bit of trouble making weight, but they did. And ZANE did look bigger to me, but I'm not sure. I think in some shots, Cody really nailed it. So it's a hard choice because they're so similar in a way. I think ZANE has to be a little bit more careful, especially in the back double or his back shots, his posing's a little bit weird in my opinion. But the surprise of the night basically is Cody coming back, I guess, to the 212s.
Yeah, I was under the impression that he was going to be a Classic Physique guy, and I think that was everybody's impression from what he had put out there. So I was a little bit surprised last week when I saw the competitor list come out, and as we've seen before, sometimes the competitor list, you'll get a guy that's in the wrong division. I think Cody compared well to ZANE. Now, ZANE is a little bit of a taller guy as far as the 212 is concerned. He's not like a Jose Raymond or a David Henry or a Flex Lewis or a Tank Dixon, where they're maxing out at 5'4", 5'5". I think ZANE is probably 5'7", 5'8", so a little bit taller. So Cody fared well against him. I think against one of those shorter, thicker guys, Cody might have really got out-muscled. But it was a good comparison between him and ZANE. Now, not to overshadow ZANE's win, because certainly a Canadian guy there in his home country, as Bob had said, the Zaniacs were out in full force, going absolutely crazy. I've been there at that Toronto Pro, seeing ZANE compete, and that crowd, they love him. They absolutely go nuts. You will not hear a louder crowd at a bodybuilding show than those Canadians cheering for ZANE Watson.
I always say that the Canadian Destroyer, it's Chris Bumstead, Melissa Bumstead, ZANE Watson, all these guys together, they're like a stable. And in America, this guy says insane crowds that cheer for him. Imagine being there in his hometown.
Yeah, the Canadians, they absolutely loved him. I mean, when I was in Toronto the last time and ZANE had won, they blew the roof off that place for him. And it's fun to see. It's fun to see the crowds get into it as much as they do. They're chanting Watson, and he's absorbing all that energy. And, it was a great showing. It was a great showing for ZANE. Now, one thing that I'm not going to shy away from is comparing Cody to other versions of himself. Now, Johnny, I'm going to give you a second to pull these pictures up. And we wanted to share a few pictures from when Cody turned pro. So we have a couple of pictures from Cody at the USA. We're going to go back and forth between those and his Toronto pictures. Here you see Cody, the 2015 USAs, winning the heavyweights and the overall. A lot of muscle there. I believe he was 21 when he won the overall, the youngest, or maybe tied for the youngest with maybe Gaspari. I'd have to look, but one of the youngest USA champions of all time. And if we see that comparison, and here's his back double bicep from the USA's photos, again courtesy of NPCNEWSONLINE. So we dug in their archives a little bit. But clearly you see in these pictures from the USA, Cody is carrying a significant more amount of muscle. Now, the interesting thing with Cody is that here we go back to Toronto. You can see that not quite the density, not quite the thickness. The thing with Cody is he's still a very young competitor. So as far as which direction he's going to take, that's hard to say. Maybe he was trying out the 212. Maybe he will still go to Classic. But when everything is said and done, people are going to be asking the question, was this a good move for Cody Montgomery? And to be perfectly honest with you guys, I don't know that it was. And I respect Cody a ton as a person. He's a very genuine young man with a good head on his shoulders. But from a competitive standpoint, and I'm going to focus on saying this from a competitive standpoint, I don't know that this was the best move for Cody's physique. He's a tall guy, and if he had trouble making 212 on that frame and on that structure, I don't know where he goes from here, whether he can go up or and still put on a little bit more muscle and make 212. Maybe he goes to classic. But, I don't know it was a good move. The thing is with Cody, with him competing at 212 here, he's only marginally bigger than he was as a teenager. And I think people are going to focus on that. Certainly as a media person, as an analyst, I'm focusing on that. If Cody weighed in at under 212, I believe his third teen national champion, he was a heavyweight. So he was, bigger at 19 than he is here, a handful of years later. And bodybuilding is a grown man sport, guys. It is a grown man sport. We know that guys hitting their peaks in their 20s and 30s. So Cody has a lot of time to grow. But right now, comparatively, he's really not bringing a bigger or a denser physique than he was at 19 years old. And so I think people are going to really question that. Again, at the end of the day, I think Cody is a phenomenal young man. I think he's got a great head on his shoulders. And, he has to do what's best for himself and what's best for his family, what's best for his personal goals. But as a bodybuilding competitor, as a competitor in the IFBB, I don't know that it was the best move for Cody. I think personally, he might have been a little bit better fit in classic, but it's hard to say until you see him in those lineups. But as far as 212 being a good fit for Cody, I don't believe it is. I think in order to be competitive in this division, he's going to have to add more size. If he struggled as much as he did to make weight, I just don't see him being dense enough on his frame and still making 212. So, if he was a couple inches shorter, maybe, but, and again, it just goes back to what his goals are. Can he win a 212 show? Sure. Is he going to be able to stand next to guys like Jose or Flex Lewis or David Henry or Derek Lunsford? Absolutely not. Not with that level of muscularity. He's not going to be able to. And I know he was in a little bit of a weird spot as far as even in the open, not carrying as much mass as some of the bigger guys. So, maybe Cody's going to need a few years to find where he really fits in the IFBB. And he certainly has age on his side. So I certainly don't want this to seem like some kind of Cody bashing session, because that's certainly not what it is. Again, I think I've made it pretty evidently clear that I'm a big fan, but I don't think 212 is going to be a division where he can be ultra successful. And obviously I might be arguing at the wrong time, being that he just got second place at a show like Toronto, but we didn't see a lot of the heavy hitters. We didn't see some of the top guys that we saw at the Arnold Classic. We didn't see the guys who are going to be contenders at the Olympia. And so, again, Cody's got time on his side, but as far as, moving forward as a successful 212 competitor, and I know the word success is relative to one's individual goals, but I don't know that this division is necessarily the best fit for him.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing. Like you've said before, I've seen the tank walking around, and just it freaks me out to know that these people are 212 pounds or under. And Flex Lewis, the champion itself, it's just the density these guys carry around. It's crazy. And I think I think you and I agree that Cody has a beautiful shape and body.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely
love to look like that in the beach or whatever, But in reality, there's some monsters in this category. We haven't even talked about the people from Saudi Arabia and the whole Camel Crew people that they just very thick muscle. But jumping in from thick to a little smaller, little slender, little classic, Terrence Ruffin comes in here, absolutely destroys the competition. Where does Terrence Ruffin fit in the classic division in the Olympia?
Terrence looked great here in Toronto, and Terrence, I think, looks great everywhere. He's one of those guys where if you see him with some warm-ups on, you wouldn't know that he's got a physique like that. He peels off, he gets on stage, he looks phenomenal. Now, Terrence is a competitor who's beaten some bigger guys, but when we're talking Olympia level, and that's where Terrence is focusing. He's going into these shows like Tampa. We saw him beat some big name guys. And he can certainly do well at the Olympia. But as far as being a legit contender for that Olympia title, Terrence is still going to have to add some serious muscle. From what he weighs and at his height, I believe he definitely has room to add muscle, and he's going to have to. And we've seen this evolution of classic physique. You have Arash Rabar seems to keep growing. You have guys like Bumstead, Regan Grimes now. Breon Ansley certainly isn't a small guy. And, we're not really sure which direction the division is exactly going to go. But again, a great win for Terrence in Toronto. But I think overall, he's definitely going to have to add more size to continue to be a contender at a top level. I always said about Terrence, he looks like a trophy standing there on stage. And if you could take his structure and put him on a 5'10" frame, he'd be one of the most impressive people that you've ever seen. A lot of comparisons to Brian Buchanan. But again, a really good win in Toronto for Terrence. And I think Terrence can win a lot of IFBB shows. But as with other competitors, he's looking at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture for Terrence is the Olympia. And, he's got a handful of months to get ready for that. But I do believe for him to really make an impact at the Olympia this year with who he's going to be running into, he's going to have to thicken up a little bit.
Wow. Today we're hearing David Baye on fire, ladies and gentlemen. He's spitting fire in a good way, because this is what people think. A lot of fans think this is the way people talk in the crowd and the fans, the people in the inside media. Sometimes we just sit each other and you just talk about it, kind of the same way we're talking about Cody and we're talking about Terrence. I love Terrence, and even watching him, I enjoy it. But how does Terrence gonna stack up next to a Rush, to a Bumstead, or Regan Grimes? So we just gotta sit back and wait, and do not hate on all of these classic physique guys. In Vegas, we will see them all, and we will have the show of shows. But talking about hating, we are going to jump now to the Mile High Pro, where Liquid Sunray sponsor athlete, cheap plug right there, for the champ, 3-time Miss Olympia, Ashley Kaltwasser returns. And in what freaking fashion? Ashley returns, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be the first one to admit that I was like a little Ashley hater back in the day, because she is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, but she was not always in the best shape.
Why
she
would
was
you
always
be a hater then?
holding a little bit of water here and there. And we all knew if this girl brought it, like hard abs and with her style and her spunkiness and everything, this girl will destroy everybody. And I have to keep my mouth shut. I have to keep not hate her anymore. I love her to death because she knows it, and I know it too. But David Baye, since you're spilling all this fire today, freaking Ashley Kaltwasser returns.
Okay,
what is your take on Ashley?
First off,
was she too hard? Was she too lean? Is this enough for her to get her title back?
Well, first off, I don't know how anybody's an Ashley Kaltwasser hater, so I'm just gonna throw that out there. When Ashley was winning, when she won those 3 Olympias, I thought she looked phenomenal. I was there for all 3 of her Olympia wins. She kind of came out of nowhere in 2013, and for a division that is really close between a lot of competitors, and we've talked, we used to talk about this all the time on MD, and it gets discussed a lot. Oh, how do you tell the difference between this girl and this girl? And they all look the same. Well, some of the girls really establish themselves as front runners, and it's usually little things. Ashley's glute ham tie-in was really phenomenal she's on a little frame. Like if you see her up person, she's got a little frame, but she's got a really round backside. And, I say that in an analytical matter, or as analytical as it gets. And her physique really pops. Her physique really pops up there on stage. Now, after winning 3 titles, we saw her slip a few spots. Courtney King won. Ashley took some time away from the stage, and everybody's got to do that once in a while. They've got to do what's best for them. She took some time away. She moved out to California, was doing some different media stuff. And everybody was wondering when she was going to come back. And, we saw her kind of on the comeback trail. I saw an interview with Ashley like a week ago, and I knew something was up because I've known this girl for, 5, 6 years now, and I have never seen her face that thin. Never. I was like, wow, she is in shape. We talk all the time about bodybuilders. Everybody comes out at the Olympia in their warm-ups, and we try to judge who's going to be shredded by whose face is the most sunk in. And when I saw Ashley's face, I'm like, this girl's got to be in shape. And then we saw pictures from the Mile High Pro, and she was dialed in. I have never seen Ashley look like this. A huge return to the stage for her. But the big talk right now is it too much? Johnny, pull up that picture again of her walking out, and you can see her abs. I mean, just popping. She was in incredible shape. I saw some pictures on social media where she even had some vascularity in her abs. I mean, that is an incredible midsection, guys. And sometimes I think we don't give these girls enough credit because we don't actually ever see them flexing their abs. I guarantee you guys, if Ashley pulls her hands up over the back of her head and sits down and flexes those abs, those things are shredded. But is that what bikini is supposed to be about? Now, Ashley, the best of who was in Denver last weekend for that midsection is crazy. Ashley was the best of the rest that weekend. But we definitely have to have the discussion. Where does she go moving forward? And is this physique she brought to Denver going to be too lean for the Olympia? And, when the bikini division originally started, we definitely saw softer looks. We saw that look get a little bit harder. And then, things kind of leveled off a little bit. I think your reigning Miss Bikini Olympia, Angelica Teixeira, is a perfect balance of muscularity and conditioning. And I think at the Olympia, what we're seeing from Ashley right here might be a tad hard. That being said, the big question everybody's asking is, can Ashley get her title back at the Olympia? In my personal opinion, you take that version of Ashley that we're seeing right here, and you soften her up maybe 1 or 2%, maybe a couple of pounds. And I think she is right there next to Angelica Teixeira, battling it out for that top spot. And I think she has came back in a major way. I think she will be a serious contender to win her Olympia title back. But again, as she stands right there, I think she's just a little bit too hard. And, all the credit goes to Ashley. You don't get in that kind of shape without busting your ass. And clearly she did that. She wanted to come back and make a statement. And boy, did she ever. The conditioning is phenomenal. The structure is phenomenal. When she turns around and hits her back shots, again, you have that glute tie or that glute ham tie-in, that was winning her shows. When she was, had her run at the top, and she seems to have brought that back. And I really think that this was a great win for Ashley. It has to be a huge confidence boost for her. And, people expected her to win. If you slip a few spots at the Olympia, it's the biggest show in the world. People understand that. You go from first to third or fourth. We get it, but when you come back and you're kind of getting, your feet wet again and you're on your comeback trail, as they say, and you do a little bit smaller show, people expect a former Olympia champion to be winning. And she brought that, and she did. And I don't know what the rest of her plans are between now and Las Vegas. But she's certainly got a big head of steam behind her with just one show. And although I'm not like this huge, get fired up for the Olympia bikini division, I'm a bodybuilding fan at heart. I actually think this is going to make things. I think this is going to make things interesting, Johnny. I really do. I think there's going to be a lot of talk between now and September about Angelica versus Ashley. Ashley was on record last week saying she thinks she can beat Angelica. Now, I saw Angelica this last weekend in Houston, and Angelica wasn't so wishy-washy with her answer. Angelica said, absolutely, I can win. She's keeping her title. She was nice about it. She certainly didn't have anything negative to say about Ashley, but she said she can win. So I didn't know that you'd ever hear me saying this, but we're bringing some excitement to the bikini division. So go figure. But congratulations to Ashley. We also had some other shows going on. We had our NorCal show. We had the Miami Muscle Beach show. You guys can see full results and full galleries from both of those shows, and get all your winners, scorecards, and everything at NPC News Online. Once again, guys, we had the NorCal and the Miami show. They didn't have bodybuilding or anything like that, so we're not going to dive too much into that, but certainly great shows put on by great promoters with great turnouts. So again, check out NPC News Online for all your results and contest galleries. Yeah, I was so talking about Angelica and being in Houston. I was there the last weekend for the American Fitness Expo. Third year it's been down in Houston. A great weekend. Shout out to the promoter Malik. We had Cutler there, Bradley Martin, Cass Martin, Paige Hathaway, Guy Cisternino, Breon Ansley, Robin Dana Lynn Bailey. We had the Strength Cartel coming out from California. I mean, there are a huge group of guys out there. It was a fun weekend. We had a blast at the expo.
You had the four-time Mr. Olympia Jay Cutler on.
Don't forget 3-time Arnold Classic champion. Jay gives me a hard time about that. We were out. Oh God, I should toss you the video, but I posted it up a few times on social media. We were out to dinner on Saturday night. We had a good group of people, and Guy Cisternino was coming down to meet us, and my buddy Matt Daniels had the waitress pull up a booster seat for Guy, which he jumped right in. He almost broke it, I think. So that was but we had a ton of fun. It was a great show down in Houston, so I'm looking forward to 2019 already. So guys, if you're looking to head to an expo to have an opportunity to meet some people that you've looked up to or follow in the fitness industry, and you have that opportunity, there's some of my pictures. There's my girlfriend. She ran into a dog there, and like a lot of people, she's got to pet all the dogs. You see me there with Juji Mufu. He was there as well. We went outside to get some video of him doing some crazy stuff. I said I'm gonna take him in a splits competition, and my other nonsense stuff that I post on Instagram. The U.S. government, don't roast marshmallows over Hawaii's volcano. There's your public service announcement from Johnny and I this week. So yeah, I don't know what else we got this week, Johnny. What were we gonna cover here?
I wanted to shout out again for the second week in a row, manager Matt, because it was through him that I enjoyed the American Fitness Expo, because he seemed like he was everywhere with everybody.
He was,
and,
Matt.
I saw
Matt was
you.
Matt was pretty integral in Matt books a lot
and
for that.
Giving Rob and Dana some turbo douche shirts with our signature 80s logo style. Why didn't you tell people all about it? Just explain to people real quick.
Oh my God! So Rob Bailey,
super douches.
Yeah, so I was telling the people that I met Dana in 2013 when she did Tampa. I interviewed her, and it was super awkward because for like 2 years before that, Rob Bailey and I had gone back and forth a little bit on the MD forums. Now, I didn't know anything about Rob. All I know is he was a dude that had a mohawk and, did some DJ stuff. And I'm like, who is this guy? And so we had a few words exchanged on the MD forums. And yes, I called him a turbo douchebag. It was super awkward when we first met in Tampa in 2013 because I was like, oh God, I had to interview Dana. I mean, so from a work standpoint, I had to interview Dana, and I was afraid there was going to be some issues. So I went up and talked to Rob and Dana and said, look, if I'm going to be doing work for MD, we got to have some sort of working relationship. Can we put the past in the past? And the rest is really history. We've been friends ever since. And they're great people. And I can attest to the fact that Rob and Dana are like every bit as cool, like off camera as you get to know them on camera. Yeah. So I had some custom shirts made that said turbo douche there, very 80s style, with some exhaust pipes, and it was a fun weekend. But I'm looking forward to going back next year. So again, there's my little shout out to the American Fitness Expo. If you guys are down in Texas next year, definitely an event you want to check out.
Awesome, very very cool. Yeah, they're very nice people. I always talk to them about their goats because they own goats and farms and all that. But before we leave, I wanna touch on something because I got a lot of fan mail. We got in all good like fan mail and stuff. And
Fan mail. Fan
I don't know
mail.
if for you
Must
people
have
that follow the
gone to
wrestling
you.
business, it's really one hand to the other with the bodybuilding industry, and the WWE just nailed this big contract. SmackDown is gonna be live. For those who don't know, SmackDown is taped and it's showed on Tuesdays, but now it's gonna be moved from the USA Network. It's gonna go to the USA Network as part of the deal with NBC. So it's a pretty much a 5-year deal, and it's worth 205 million annually and more than $1 billion overall. This is reported by the Hollywood Reporter.
Right.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna be on Friday nights instead of Tuesdays. Of course, it's gonna do battle with New Japan World Wrestling. And I got a question basically saying, a couple years back, the industry was changing and they were saying that TV was dead and, cable television was not going to be a thing anymore. It's going to be more about, the networks, internet, TV and all that. And the question came about, now that TV is kind of doing like a little comeback, would we ever see the bodybuilding and fitness world make a comeback to TV? Now we have FSN, we have ESPN, we have this, we have that. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. I kind of know the answer to it in my own opinion, but, now we're basically talking here. But since TV is kind of making a comeback, do you think that this era of bodybuilding, would you think it's going to come back to the TV, to a cable near you?
Man, I would really love to see bodybuilding be back on TV. I remember in the 90s when I first really got into weightlifting, ESPN had American Muscle, they had Flex TV, Sean Ray was working out with Lee Priest and Kevin Levrone and Boyer Coe and Frank Zane and Linda Murray and God, everybody was on there. They all had their striped spandex shorts. And no, it was great. But, they even had competitive bodybuilding, the USAs and the Nationals. But just with the current landscape, I don't know if we'll see bodybuilding back on any sort of mainstream TV. The thing about bodybuilding competitions is if you love bodybuilding, they're exciting. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're really into bodybuilding, the Olympia's fun, the Arnold's fun, all these shows are a blast. But if you're not really into bodybuilding, that's a hard sell, And I always tell people, like, look, if let's say you're not into football, but you come to Green Bay for a Packers game, it doesn't matter whether you like football or not. You're gonna have a damn good time. It's gonna be a party, and you're gonna be entertained. And with bodybuilding, for people who aren't really, big fans, you might get to a show and there's definitely a freak factor and a wow factor when you see some of these people. But I don't know that there's ever going to be a big enough audience for just straight bodybuilding to be back on TV. Now, if you could find some way to mix some of your social media stars who are in fitness with some competitive bodybuilding and things like that. You have faces like Callum Von Moger, and Bradley Martin, and throw in some Phil Heath and some Ruley and some Jay Cutler. I don't know, maybe. But again, TV and everything like that is driven by advertising dollars. And, the industry as a whole, obviously there's a lot of money in the fitness industry. But as far as competitive bodybuilding, having, just the pure numbers to be back on TV, that I'm not really sure of. I mean, I would love to see it. It's going to take what it's going to take is it's going to take a big star. It's going to take the next Arnold. And we never know when that's going to come. So I'm cautiously optimistic that one day we'll see bodybuilding go a little bit mainstream. I know you have some fans who don't want to see it mainstream. You have like these old school guys we like it being a niche sport and stuff like that. But as far as getting some sort of big TV deal, I don't know that that's something that's going to happen. I could definitely see specials and documentaries on bodybuilding. I know a couple of years ago, NBC was, going to do stuff with the Olympia. The Rock's production company, Seven Buck Productions, did a really cool thing on last year's Olympia. So that was cool to see. So I think things like that. I think things like, maybe a documentary on leading into the Olympia, or maybe following some guys going into the Arnold Classic could be something. But as far as like a weekly TV show or something like that on bodybuilding, they're gonna leave it up to you and me, Johnny. So,
Yes, they're
but
gonna leave it up
I'll
to you and
I'll
me
keep my
basically.
fingers
And
crossed.
I think it's gonna take somebody. I would totally throw out there. I would throw Triple H out there because remember back in the day,
Oh,
2003,
he was a
Mr. Olympia, he was
phenomenal
there.
announcer.
He kind of understood what it took to take it. You know, when you're dealing with TV, you got to deal with time, you got to deal with people and certain angles and storylines and all that. And I think you need that power behind the machine, somebody that understands what it takes to bring the sport that we love, and I guess the hobby we call sport or whatever, to bring it to life and make it interesting, make it fun. Because again, like you said, some people don't want that. Especially when I go to New York, you get all these fans that they don't want that. They want the underground scene to stay
Right, right.
active. They want it as a like close little group. They don't want it to get out in the world. They hate all these Instagrammers. They hate them for life. So that's pretty much our take. Before we leave, we gotta post out there, this little quote of the day. Find someone that looks at you the way I look at Jay Cutler during a
Oh
seminar
my
because
God,
we
my
had to put that out there. He's not the only one that looks at Jay Cutler this way, and for that, David Baye has to be shown to the world.
oh my God. No, so a couple of times a year, my girlfriend will come along to these events. I'm working at most of these events, so I don't. The thing is, I don't have a lot of downtime at these events. It's cool to travel, but usually I fly in, land. I'll get some workouts in. You're at prejudging, you're at finals, you're at the expo, you're at whatever. So she'll come with me a few times a year, and she was sitting in the front row taking pictures, and she was giving me a hard time. She's like, you look like you have a crush on Jay Cutler when you're looking up there. I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe I do have a crush on Jay Cutler. Look at his quads. Yeah, no, no. So anyhow, no, a lot of really good pictures there. You see my view from a morning cardio, some of the girls with the seminars, some cool stuff from the expo. In the upper right hand corner, Jay Cutler hanging out there until 6:45, signing autographs long after the expo closed. They were turning the lights out on Jay, and he was still there. But yeah, that's my. If you guys,
Look,
you guys have,
we got a little,
hey, look
we
at
got a little
that,
update
oh my
on
God,
your six-pack
that picture looks like
selfie.
that picture looks like I'm not wearing any pants, dude. I've got. Looks like you can't. Looks like you can't see. I have black shit
Oh
on.
my gosh.
Oh my God, 9 weeks out, so I figured I'd throw up a progress picture. But I think that's gonna do it for us for this week, Johnny. What do you say?
Yeah, I think so too, guys. I think on today's show we capture a little bit of all the magic that went on, especially this past weekend that was so hectic with pro shows. But that tells you what the IFBB Pro League is doing week after week. And we proudly support the IFBB Pro League and the NPC. For David Baye, I am Johnny Styles. This has been Inside Out. We'll see you next week.